a group of Hitler Youth, his child soldiers, some as young as 14. These were the boys which this once mighty empire was now relying on to defend the German capital of Berlin.
History says he breathed his last breath in Berlin. Other sources point to a different ending.
In today's edition, newly declassified documents would prove that Hitler ended his life in Argentina. Tell us more.
Far across the ocean in Argentina. Today, we bring the records and everything else you need to know to the table. We will show you who followed the leads, where investigators searched, and which documents remain unsettled. Listen closely to the facts and place the pieces where they belong. Keep an open mind and judge the evidence for yourself at the end. Prepare for surprising information that will leave you with so many questions. But if the world already believed Hitler died in Berlin, why did whispers of his survival refuse to fade? Could buried secrets and hidden witnesses have fueled an alternate ending? How the claim began. The idea that Adolf Hitler escaped Berlin did not begin as a mere claim. It grew from confusion, secrecy, and many small reports in the weeks after the city fell in April 1945. Soldiers and civilians in Berlin described chaotic scenes. Soviet forces recovered parts of the body in the bunker area and kept control of the investigation. The Soviet handling of the scene and restricted press access left gaps in public information. Those gaps made room for rumors. Several people who worked close to Hitler gave statements about the final days. Heinz Linge, Hitler's valet, described entering different rooms and seeing bodies. Otto Gunsche, an SS adjutant, told interrogators what he observed after the deaths. Traudl Junge, Hitler's secretary, later wrote a first-hand account of her time in the bunker. Their versions agreed on many core points while differing in details. Small differences in memory and the way the Soviets questioned witnesses fed doubts among people. Outside Berlin, reports began to link distant events to those final hours. In the months after the war, German submarines surfaced far from home. U-530 and U-977 surrendered in Mar del Plata, Argentina. Crew statements, official logs, and post-war interviews with sailors entered public records. The presence of U-boats in Argentine waters raised questions about what, if anything, might have been carried ashore. Cold War rivalry affected how information spread. Soviet statements about recovered remains were sometimes confusing. Western journalists and intelligence officers pressed for answers. In that environment, a small number of unconfirmed sightings gained attention. Letters, press reports, and eyewitness statements reached intelligence agencies in Washington and London. Investigators recorded those tips. Many tips led nowhere. Some contained names and dates that could be checked. Others rested on oral memory and unreliable detail. At the same time, real cases of Nazi fugitives reaching South America were confirmed. Adolf Eichmann lived in Buenos Aires for years under the name Ricardo Clement. Josef Mengele traveled through Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil after the war. Erich Priebke lived in the Bariloche region in Argentina. These known cases proved that escape routes, often called rat lines, existed and could move people from Europe to South America. The documented escapes of Eichmann and others gave credence to the idea that high-level fugitives could vanish. Wartime chaos also affected records. Many files in German offices were destroyed or lost during the final days. Some travel and port records in Europe and South America were incomplete. Police records in Argentina sometimes lacked the depth modern investigators need. That patchwork of lost and surviving documents made it harder to build a continuous paper trail from Berlin to any given town in Argentina. Private investigators, journalists, and later authors picked up these loose threads. They traced boat movements, interviewed local residents, and looked through foreign archives. Early reporters repeated eyewitness accounts without full archival checks. Later writers used declassified intelligence files to compile lists of sightings and leads. The blend of eyewitness reports, intelligence information, and local memory became the raw material for the escape theory. Newspapers in Europe and the Americas carried mixed accounts in May 1945. Some reports quoted Soviet spokesmen, while others ran gossip from port towns. Private detectives, war correspondents, and former intelligence officers chased tips. The mixture of official statements, local gossip, and active searches produced a long list of leads. Many of those leads would surface again in later decades when scholars and authors scoured archives. Two patterns kept the idea alive. First, the early gaps in official accounts left space for other stories. Second, confirmed cases of Nazi fugitives in Argentina added practical proof that escape was possible. Over time, books and television shows visited Argentine towns, interviewed residents, and highlighted files that seemed to fit the story. Years of research have not produced a single continuous paper chain linking Hitler in Berlin to a named residence in Argentina. Intelligence files record many unverified tips. Local records sometimes show arrivals that are hard to explain. Witness memory can be true while still not trusted. The claim that Hitler escaped began in messy circumstances. That messy origin is why the idea still attracts attention, even as many questions remain unanswered. But here's where the trail takes a darker turn. If scattered memories and rumors kept the story alive, what happened when the world's most powerful intelligence agencies entered the chase? FBI and CIA, papers that kept the story alive. After the war, American agencies gathered a good flow of reports about possible Nazi leaders in South America. The Federal Bureau of Investigation saved letters, tips, and press clippings. The Central Intelligence Agency held internal memos, translations, and field information. Reading the files shows that investigators faced many claims that required careful checking and very few that stood on their own. The files include straightforward entries. A private citizen might write with a name and a place. A local newspaper could print a short item about a strange arrival at a hotel. An agent would record the tip and add a date and location. Those small recordings grew over time. They formed a map that later writers and researchers could follow. The documents are not proof by themselves. They are records that someone thought the item might matter. Investigators used several methods to test tips. They checked passenger lists and port logs for matching dates. They examined hotel registries and police registry books. They interviewed residents, former crew members, and local officials. Those agents compared one record against another to see whether entries pointed to the same person. Sometimes records supported one another. Often, they did not. A clear pattern in the files is the number of sightings that describe a man who looks like a famous figure. Witnesses often noted the hair, manner, or way a person walked. A tired man of a certain age in an Argentine town might be compared to a famous picture. Files show how an initial sighting could multiply into several similar tips across different towns. Those agents always wrote important information and frequently warned about the limits of a single identification. The records also show how practical problems slowed verification. Some hotel books were lost or destroyed. Port lists might list only the first name or a nickname. Local registries used varied spellings and handwriting that made matching difficult. Language differences and too many translations sometimes altered key details. In many cases, a name on a list did not show a passport number or a birth date. Those missing elements made a clean match hard to obtain. The search required patience. Even so, the files record several leads that drew real attention. The surrender of U-530 and U-977 at Mar del Plata prompted focused enquiries. Crew interviews, logbooks, and naval reports gave dates and points of departure. Agents tried to trace what the submarines carried and who disembarked at coastal sites. The crews denied transporting high-level passengers. Investigators realized there were inconsistencies in crew statements, which kept interest alive among analysts and publishers. Another strand in the papers points to local facilitators. Names such as Carlos Fuldner and other known helpers appear in various entries. These records show networks that moved people, arranged papers, and provided housing. The files gave agents real people to investigate. Tracing those helpers led to bank records, shipping invoices, and hotel addresses that could be checked in municipal archives. The CIA and FBI papers also reveal how information improved over time. Early post-war months produced many raw tips from private citizens. Later decades added translated press clippings, interviews with aging witnesses, and scanned local records. Agencies often annotated older tips with follow-up investigations as new data appeared. That layering makes the files useful for modern research because they present both the original claim and the effort to verify it. At the same time, the archives hold many open items. Pages marked unconfirmed recur. A tip may show promise at first, and then fail to produce supporting proof. Several entries end with an agent stating that the matter could not be verified. Those repeated dead ends explain how the papers keep the story alive without an answer. For authors and investigators, the declassified files serve two roles. They provide raw material, and they set limits. Writers can find names, dates, and places that were not public before. Those details can guide field searches in archives. Careful readers recognize that an intelligence record reporting a sighting is not the same as a court document proving identity. The files are useful starting points. They require follow-up on the ground with municipal records, interviews, and cross-checks. The FBI and CIA records form a ledger that tracks leads and failures. They show how many leads were taken seriously and how often they stalled. For anyone tracing the claim that a famous man reached Argentina, the files are essential reading. They give names and dates to chase, and they show how hard it is to turn rumor into proof. But here's the problem. While the archives mapped countless trails, they stopped short of resolution. Which of those dead ends were true failures, and which were deliberately buried to hide something bigger? Gerard Williams, Grey Wolf, and The Modern Push. In 2011, a book appeared that put the Hitler escape idea back in the public view.
What this book shows us is that there was already the beginnings of a plan had the war gone differently and the Nazis had won the war and taken administrative control of North America, that the Holocaust would have happened here.
Grey Wolf was written by Gerard Williams and Simon Dunstan. The book argued that Adolf Hitler left Berlin in April 1945 and later lived in Argentina. Williams presented interviews, translated press clippings, local records, and travelers who remembered strange arrivals. The book set out a route from Germany to the Argentinian coast and named towns where investigators should look. Gerard Williams had a long career in journalism. He worked for Reuters, the BBC, and Sky News. His background helped the book gain attention from readers and television producers. Simon Dunstan was known for military history writing and for looking into wartime movements. Together, they signed a clear claim that linked bunker events to South American shores. The book relied on several kinds of material. One type was witness interviews with local residents in places such as San Carlos de Bariloche and La Falda. Locals spoke about a man who walked and spoke in a way that reminded them of someone from Europe. Another type was port and naval records related to U-530 and U-977. The surrender and the crew interviews for those submarines were part of the trail that writers used to show a possible sea route. A third type of material was declassified intelligence documents and press items that had not been widely seen before. Williams and Dunstan also used maps and a step-by-step scenario. They suggested that Hitler left the bunker, moved to a nearby airfield, boarded a plane or small boat, and then crossed the Atlantic with help from secret supporters. The sequence included specific stops and proposed contacts in Argentina. The proposed contacts were people with known links to German communities in South America. That level of detail made the claim easier to follow on page and on screen. The book led to a film adaptation and to renewed searches by private teams. Filmmakers and local researchers revisited archives and church books in Argentine towns. They scanned hotel logs, tax lists, and property registers. Some local papers provided old press clippings that showed unusual arrivals around 1945 and the years that followed. Those items kept the story alive and offered fresh leads that earlier researchers had not widely published. Television picked up the story. In 2014, a documentary based on Grey Wolf aired in several countries and drove viewers to search archives and forums. Programs such as Hunting Hitler also re-examined the Argentine leads and filmed on location in Bariloche and Buenos Aires. Those shows used radar scans, interviews, and archival reels to push inquiries forward. The media attention increased public pressure on archives to open records and on local historians to answer some questions. Critics responded quickly. Historians noted that witness memory can be faulty when many years separate the sighting and the interview. A common criticism was that a single matching detail across different sources is not enough to prove identity. Skeptics pointed to the strong eyewitness and forensic case for Hitler's death in Berlin and to the dental records that have been cited by scientific teams. Other critics examined the submarine records and asked how credible the crew statements were. The U-boat logs showed different departures and routes. The crew accounts sometimes changed in later interviews. Critics argued that missing or confusing entries in naval files do not equal proof of a passenger transfer. The burden of proof remains high. A chain of linked documents would be needed to move the claim beyond possibility. Supporters of the Grey Wolf thesis argue that even if proof is scarce, the new local materials deserve attention. They say that municipal archives, hotel books, and private papers can contain overlooked data. That view led to more on-the-ground searches in Argentina by independent researchers. Some teams reported new names and entries, while other searches turned up nothing decisive. The modern push shows a pattern. A claim is proposed, local work is done, files are found that appear interesting, and debates follow. The debate over Grey Wolf did not settle the question. The book added detail and urged archives to be opened. It also highlighted gaps in the record that researchers can test. Whether the material will ever form a sealed case is still an open task for archival work and careful cross-checking. But here's the haunting part. If the critics were right, the story should have ended in Berlin. Yet trails of whispers kept surfacing. Why did so many of them lead to Argentina? Argentina, places, people, and known Nazi networks. Argentina became a destination for many Europeans fleeing their countries after the war.
Become a hot topic on social media after Argentina's Javier Milei recently announced that they would declassify all government documents relating to Nazi fugitives who settled in Argentina after World War II.
The country offered space, ports, and communities where newcomers could blend. Buenos Aires had large German-speaking neighborhoods. Towns like San Carlos de Bariloche and La Falda in the Lake District drew professionals and former officers. These places offered privacy and a chance to start a quiet life far from scrutiny. The Argentine government, under Juan Domingo Perón, adopted policies that favored European immigration. Perón and his inner circle saw value in technical skills and in strengthening national industry. That attitude opened doors for many immigrants coming from Europe in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Officials and private contacts helped arrange papers and housing for some arrivals. Escape routes known as rat lines moved people from Europe to South America. The rat lines used a mix of church contacts, former SS members, sympathetic clergy, and private helpers. These routes connected ports in Spain and Italy to destinations in Argentina and beyond. They relied on travel documents, transit visas, and agents who could secure false identities. Certain Argentine individuals played key roles. People of German descent and contacts in Europe offered shelter and work. Names such as Carlos Fuldner are often mentioned in investigations. Fuldner and others worked with local German communities to find jobs, buy properties, and place new arrivals in safe houses. Their actions show how local networks functioned on the ground. The known cases of Nazi fugitives in Argentina provide concrete examples. Adolf Eichmann lived in Buenos Aires as Ricardo Clement and worked in a factory. Mossad tracked him through school records, work contracts, and neighbor statements before his capture in 1960. Joseph Mengele moved through Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil using false papers and local contacts. Eric Priebke lived in Bariloche and later faced legal action. These are documented cases with court records and press files. Beyond famous fugitives, many lower-ranking officers and functionaries also arrived and settled. They worked as technicians, farmers, and business owners. Some kept low profiles and used German clubs and language schools to blend in. Their presence created networks where others could find support and employment. Ports and transport links mattered. Ships carried people and goods from Mediterranean ports such as Genoa and Barcelona. From there, passengers traveled to South American ports or to transit points where final papers were prepared. The logistics involved payments to smugglers, use of shipping companies, and help from officials who turned a blind eye. Air travel later became a route for those with forged documents. Church institutions also appear in many ratline accounts. Certain clergy in Europe and South America provided temporary shelter, transit letters, or contacts that eased movement. These church contacts were not a single organization, but a loose web of individuals. Motives varied from sympathy to corruption. Local Argentine law enforcement and intelligence showed mixed responses. Some officials assisted new arrivals. Others investigated suspicious individuals once international pressure rose. The capture of Eichmann required coordination between foreign intelligence, Mossad, and local authorities. Argentine migration ledgers and police registers later became key sources for researchers. The social landscape included German schools, clubs, and businesses. Those spaces allowed former Nazis to gather, find work, and live within a familiar culture. Technical firms sometimes employed immigrants with wartime skills. That employment gave them stability and helped them avoid attention. Histories of the rat lines show that escape required resources, contacts, and planning. Travel documents had to be forged or obtained through sympathetic officials. Payments were made to intermediaries. Safe houses and new identities needed local verification. These practical details explain how some fugitives managed to relocate and remain unseen for years. Recent research used municipal archives, church books, and local newspapers to confirm many arrivals. Scholars and journalists compared migration records, property deeds, and bank ledgers to trace movements. Those methods produced solid proofs for many fugitives, even if the claim about a single high leader remains unproven. The Argentine cases show how networks, local facilitators, and international routes combined to move people across continents. Ongoing archive releases and digitization projects continue to reveal new entries, allowing researchers to test past leads against fresh evidence and sometimes overturn old claims. But here's the chilling question that still haunts researchers. If archives can map entire escape routes across continents, then why do some still insist Hitler slipped through the cracks? Forensics, witnesses, and the Berlin Record. In late April 1945, several people who were close to Adolf Hitler described the last hours in the Führer bunker. Names that appear often include Heinz Linge, Hitler's valet, Otto Gunsche, an SS adjutant, and Traudl Junge, a young secretary. Their accounts record the same main events. They said that Hitler and Eva Braun took poison and that Hitler shot himself. Staff described how the bodies were wrapped and taken outside to be burned. Those reports formed the first set of public records about the deaths. Eyewitness accounts vary on details. Some witnesses described the order of events differently. Others remembered times and minor actions in ways that did not match each other exactly. Memory cracks are normal when people tell a story years after it happened. Even so, the overall pattern from multiple witnesses points to a common outcome in the bunker. Soviet investigators recovered fragments that they said belonged to the bodies. For decades, the handling of those items and the public statements about them caused confusion. Some Soviet reports were inconsistent. That inconsistency fed the idea that the official story had gaps. However, investigators preserved dental fragments and some prosthetic material that could be compared with wartime dental records. Dental evidence became the most important technical proof. Hitler had complex dental work done by his dentist, Hugo Blaschke, and dental technicians such as Käthe Häusermann and Fritz Echtmann. Dental X-rays and written records exist from before the war. In recent years, researchers compared the dental fragments held in Russian archives with pre-war X-rays and dental information. The match between the fragments and the dentist records is a strong point for the Berlin death account. A number of tests and studies examined the physical material. One study in 2018 used dental analysis to compare the fragments with known prosthetic work and concluded that the fragments matched Hitler's records. Separate tests on a skull fragment once thought to belong to Hitler suggested it belonged to a woman. Those different test results fueled debate. The key technical issue remained the dental comparison because dental structures are hard to fake or confuse. Forensic work also includes witness cross-checks. Officers who handled the bunker aftermath took statements and wrote down reports of what they had found. Those witness records were compared with later memoirs and with Allied intelligence reports. Where the records align, they support the Berlin account. Where they differ, researchers state the reasons for variance, including stress, confusion, or imperfect memory during wartime. Several historians have compiled these sources. They list the names of the staff members, the dates of statements, and the physical items reportedly recovered. The written record is detailed enough to construct a timeline of the final days and the handling of remains. That timeline includes the reports of burials, later recovery by Soviet forces, and the transfer of fragments into state archives. Opponents of the Berlin account point to Soviet secrecy and to specific gaps in the paper trail. They highlight early Soviet claims that withheld full details and the slow release of archive material. Some critics also point to occasional inconsistent statements from Soviet officers who interrogated bunker staff. Those points have kept interest alive in alternative claims. On the other hand, the combination of multiple eyewitness statements and the dental comparison forms a concrete body of evidence. The dental material ties physical fragments to a documented set of dental records. The witness testimony supplies names, times, and actions that align with the technical evidence. Together, these lines of proof form the core case for death in the bunker. For anyone weighing the options, the key question is the standard of proof. A set of consistent witness statements, plus matching dental records, meets a high forensic bar. It leaves open minor questions about handling and later treatment of remains. Those remaining questions have not produced a document or an item that overturns the link between the recovered fragments and the wartime dental records. The Berlin record, therefore, remains the most direct source for the claim that Hitler died in the bunker. New archival releases continue to refine details, but the core forensic picture stays overall consistent. But here's the shadow hanging over it all. If the Berlin record is that solid, why do so many still insist on another story? What evidence could possibly overturn it? The paper trail idea. What would prove it? If someone wanted to prove that Hitler lived in Argentina after 1945, the simplest and strongest route runs through kept documents. Famous people leave paperwork when they travel, buy property, or open bank accounts. The same would be true for any hidden refugee. The method begins with arrival records and ends with a linked life in the country. The first step is immigration and passenger lists. Investigators should search the port logs of Mar del Plata, ship manifests, and airfield records. The surrender reports and interrogation notes from U-530 and U-977 offer dates and crew statements that can be checked against those port lists. If a boat landed and a passenger left, that person might appear on a dock registry or in police records. Finding a matching name or a clear alias in several independent records would be strong evidence. Second, look for hotel and boarding house registries. Hotels kept guest logs and registration forms. A man hiding under an assumed name might still register at a hotel on arrival. If a name on a hotel register matches a pattern in a shipping list, that link would move the search forward. Third, check municipal records. Property deeds, land transactions, and tax records can show where a person lived. If a family name or an alias appears in a deed book and matches a hotel or arrival date, the chain becomes stronger. Fourth, search the bank and business records. Opening a bank account, buying goods, or starting a small business leaves a trail of signatures and transactions. A consistent pattern of deposits, money transfers, or payments can be traced to tell a life story. Fifth, search local church registers. Baptisms, marriages, and funeral registers are often kept for generations. A name that appears in a church book can sometimes be matched to a property record or a newspaper notice. Sixth, compare handwriting and photographs. If a suspect file turns up, experts can compare a handwritten note to known samples. Old passport photos or ID cards can be compared to wartime pictures. For DNA proof, investigators can seek remains, ask for DNA comparisons with known relatives, or test hair and bone if found. Each method has legal and ethical rules, but in principle they provide strong links if used properly. Finally, cross-reference to intelligence files. FBI and CIA declassified records include names and dates. Those records can be a starting point for municipal searches. Investigators like Bob Baer and John Sensick used agency files as a map and then searched archives on the ground. Gerard Williams used local interviews and reports to build his claims. The key difference between a strong case and a weak one is how many independent records match and how well the links hold up under scrutiny.
We then have witness after witness in Argentina who saw him, and the interesting thing is they didn't all say we saw him in 1952 in Buenos Aires, in Cordoba, in Mar del Plata.
This approach also shows why the current evidence is not enough. Many claims rest on single sightings or on unlinked documents. Single items can have errors. The paper trail method demands at least 3 linked documents that point to the same individual. Until researchers find that chain, an arrival record, a place to live, and signs of a settled life, The claim that Hitler lived in Argentina remains a hypothesis. It is a hypothesis worth testing because Argentina was a proven refuge for some Nazi fugitives, and because the structure for escape did exist there in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Recently, there have been moves to open Argentine files to outside researchers. In 2025, some archives were released that include police records and intelligence records about post-war arrivals. Those releases can provide direct leads that were not available to earlier authors. If those materials include names, hotel entries, or port records, they could be compared to the declassified FBI and CIA records. That comparison could either strengthen a case or close weak leads. In practice, careful document work is exacting, but it is the surest route to a final finding. Obstacles also exist. Records may be lost, destroyed, or sealed. Some officials may resist release. Political sensitivity can slow access. Even so, modern digitization projects and forensic genealogy give new tools. That means a careful, patient search of registries, bank ledgers, and naval logs could reveal links that were once hidden in paper piles. The paper trail idea is a clear test. It asks for documents that a court or archive would accept as linked evidence. That is the full picture as it stands now. Decide for yourself after you have read the records. You can also share your thoughts on what we have discussed. Also, ask as many questions as you can. Let us keep this conversation going. If you want more on this topic, like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Watch our next video for more interesting stories.